Hello again. Viewers in Britain may have noticed that the Jamaican government is preparing to send Britain a bill for the suffering caused by slavery. One figure which is being suggested is that this might amount to about £7 billion. Of course, in the United States, there's been talk of reparations going on for some time now. The idea is that every black person in America whose ancestors were brought to the country as slaves should be entitled to a large sum of money as compensation for all the suffering over the years. After all, the slaves worked without wages, and it's claimed that they contributed in no small measure to building the United States and bringing about the prosperity which we see there today. It's only right that they should receive some recompense for this. That, at least, is the reasoning behind the idea of reparations. A similar scheme was launched, of course, after the end of the American Civil War and the emancipation of the slaves. A proclamation in 1865 by General Sherman was intended to provide every freed slave with 40 acres of land and a mule. I give a link in the description to this video of the offer as shown in the film of Gone with the Wind. I doubt that the government will get off so lightly this time round. I can't imagine all that many black Americans being content these days with 40 acres and a mule. There are two reasons why some in successive American governments have thought that such reparations might be a good idea. Neither reason is at all convincing or indeed sensible. The first is on grounds of natural justice, and the second that it might improve the educational outcomes and social standing of African Americans in general. Looking at the first claim, that it's only just that those whose ancestors did so much to build up the wealth of the country and received nothing in return, precisely the same argument could be applied to the white working class in both the United States and Britain. My own ancestors were all working people who slaved away in factories and building sites with little to show for it. Both my grandmothers went out charring, that is to say, cleaning other people's houses and offices, well into their 70s, and they both died in rented property. All their money went to landlords and shopkeepers, and when they died they didn't leave a single penny. They certainly helped to make a lot of the wealth that Britain has, and they didn't get any share in it. Should I be entitled to a payment now for all that prosperity which my ancestors created and which brought them no sort of benefit? Just imagine the scene if these reparations were to be granted in America. Two poor families living side by side, one white and the other black. Both struggle to make ends meet, and the ancestors of both have been exploited by landlords and factory owners from the 19th century onward. One day, the government sends a cheque to the black family, which consists of a man and woman and their two children. One figure which has been mooted is that every African American should be given £267,000. I give a link to the calculations for this in the description to this video, an ABC news item from last autumn. Multiply this amount by 4, and overnight the black family become millionaires. The white family, just as poor, receive nothing at all. How fair would that be? More to the point, what sort of anger and frustration will be created among working class white people by such a scheme? The second justification for the idea of reparations is that it would create a fairer and more equitable society and increased chances of black children doing well in future life. In other words, it would balance out some societal inequality. At the moment, black people do tend to have less money than white people, and they tend to live in poorer housing, and their incomes are lower. And there's an attainment gap that black children are less likely to do well at school or go on to college. The intellectuals and academics who advocate this scheme on these grounds say that black children underperform educationally largely because of poverty. They often live in overcrowded homes and their parents cannot afford to buy them books or take them to art galleries and museums. Nor can they currently afford to pay for private tutors of the kind which are often engaged by Chinese families to help their children get on in school. Increase their wealth in this way and it will even out this inequality. The parents will also be able to invest some of the money so that the children would have enough to pay for them to go to college when they're 18. The flaws in this idea are, I rather suspect, pretty obvious to those of us who live in the real world. Many politicians and academics don't ever meet real working class people, other than the cleaners that come to do their home or the garage mechanics that service their cars and so on. They certainly never set foot in the homes of working class families, either black or white. Here is what the Germans call a Gedanken experiment, a little thought experiment that we can conduct. Imagine, if you will, that a man from the government knocks on the door of a very poor working family in either Britain or America and hands them a cheque for $1 million or £1 million or any other large sum. What do you suppose will happen? Will the parents immediately switch off the television and rush out to spend money on educational resources for their children? Will they start looking around for a private tutor to help the kids with the homework? Perhaps they might book tickets for an expensive exhibition at a major art gallery. Or would they make an appointment at the bank and see how they can invest a chunk of the money in the trust fund so that it will pay for the children to attend university in 10 or 12 years' time? I know, and so does everybody watching this, that this is a fantasy which only an intellectual would dream up. In fact, the first thing would probably be a trip to Disneyland, which would require a new wardrobe full of designer gear and expensive trainers. Then there would be top-of-the-range mobile telephones and various other goods. I live in a street of ordinary people, and I can promise you that this is what would happen if a cheque for £1 million came through the letterbox one morning. The idea that throwing all that money at black families in the United States would increase their educational prospects is quite mad. There would be no justice in it, and neither would it act to reduce inequality. Frankly, most of that money would be spent within a year. However, with Jamaica demanding reparations from Britain and the way that the Black Lives Matter movement has distorted all political discourse over the last year, I strongly suspect that reparations are indeed coming to America. I think personally that 40 acres and a mule would probably meet the case better than throwing billions of dollars about like confetti.